And we're going to learn here in our Mishnah that that when we do good, it's amplified. When we do the opposite, it is also amplified. So today we're starting the first mission, the fifth parak. Just by raise of hands, who's in New York City right now? It's so interesting. Yeah, it's about 50-50. All right. And it's snowing there yet or just raining? Yeah, in Lakewood, it's now a wintry mix. It's not a pleasant wintry mix. So yeah, so we're going to hunker down and it'll be fine. All right, so the Mishnah today reads as follows. There's clearly a shift that's going on to the structure of the Mishnayos from the fourth chapter to the fifth. In the fifth here, we've got a structure that's going to continue from the first Mishnah, and you'll see here, even the seventh Mishnah, the sixth Mishnah, there's 7 things, there's 10 things, there's 10 tests, it's a very different format. It's like, they shifted from like some sort of Word document to another, where this is just how the Mishnayos read. It's interesting. So, Ba'asara ma'amaros nivra ha'olam, that God created this world through 10 utterances. The Vilna Gaon Rabbi Eliyahu Kramer here on the Mishnah actually lets us know what are those 10 utterances. The first one is actually Bereshis. Bereshis bar Elokim S is itself an utterance. It's the only one that's not intuitive. The other 9 are basically where it says, and God said, let there be, and there was. There are about 9 of those. And then there's this one of Bereshis bara. We could spend, every day during the entirety of this period just talking about the word Bereshis and what all of that means. But the idea of a creation is itself a creation. Nothingness, as if you ever saw like the Never Ending Story in the 80s, I think it might have been like the first movie I ever saw in my life. The nothingness is not actually something in rabbinic Judaism. Nothing, as we understand it, is the absence of something, and the absence of something in that way is actually a creation. It's the rabbis tell us that we can't really understand what nothingness is. It's the lack of a reality. It's not the presence of space. Space itself is a creation. Time is a creation. All of the dimensions that we are aware of is a creation. There are a lot of dimensions that we are not aware of. Perhaps the most famous, the Ramchal writes elsewhere that we talk about 613 commandments, and that's true. We have 613 biblical commandments, but he says that there are actually 1,000 commandments. It's just the remainder, the ones that we don't know about, weren't affected in the original sin, and so therefore they're not ones that we're conscious of. And it's a fascinating conversation, the things that we are interfacing with without understanding, and to recognize that there's so much about this world that we don't understand. To say it better, there's very little about this world that we do understand. So anyways, the fifth Mishnah chapter starts that the world was created with 10 utterances. Obviously, if God wanted to create the world through one utterance in one moment, God could have. The idea of a 7-day of creation narrative is not because it was necessary, but because it was intentional. And of course, when we think about the 7 days of creation, it can't be 7 24-hour periods of time, days as we understand it, because the sun and the moon weren't created on the first day or the second day early on in creation. And so you have several days with no sun. So it itself requires a deeper understanding of what a day is. Again, we can talk about creation for a long time, but Bereshis as a beginning is itself an utterance of creation. And that's what's important for this Mishnah, because that's the first of the 10. Ma Talmud Leimer, what is the Torah trying to convey to us, to teach us? And of course, there are many lessons, but why are there 10 as opposed to just one? If God wanted to, God could have done it with one utterance. Ella lihipara min harishayim shema'abdin esa olam shenivra ba'asara ma'amares. That it sounds like it's like a weighted test, both for the positive and the negative. Had there been one statement and then someone came to destroy it, so then I don't know how to get that off, but then then a person would be responsible for destroying a world that was created in 10 in one utterance. But because it was created in 10 utterances, so then it's 10 times as bad in terms of the punishment for the same action. And of course, because God is good, the reward will always be greater than the punishment. So v'litin schar tov l'tzadikim. So too, when it comes to giving the reward to the righteous, shemekaymin es ha'olam shenivra ba'asara ma'amares. That by acting in a righteous way, we're actually able to sustain this world, and not just the world that was created in one utterance, but rather in 10. It doesn't seem all that compelling because it's still a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of the good to the evil. It's just right. Everything's just by magnifying by 10. But 10 in Jewish thought represents a complete cycle of something. All of Jewish numbers are on cycles of basically 1 to 10, and that repeats until you get to 1,000. And then it kind of comes back to 0. The word for 0, fs, is related to the word elef, which is 1,000, meaning aleph is 1. Aleph is 1, and then aleph and to elef to 1,000 is 1. It's one cycle. It's a cycle of tens. It's 10, 100, 1,000, and then it's 10,000. Right, 100,000, and then it gets to 1,000,000. But 1,000,000, we don't actually have that word. We have, many of that, like rivavos alafim, right? We have many thousands of thousands. So the idea of the world being created in 10 utterances is important on a couple of different levels. One is that it has a parallel by the 10 Commandments. Here, it's a soft language of speech. It's asara ma'amares. A mimer is a statement. It's not a commandment. Rashi here points out that it's in the Hebrew Bible that it's a soft speech. Whenever it says amar, it means soft. Whenever it says dibor, it means harsh. The Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, were actually was a harsh language. The rabbis tell us that the 10 plagues act as a stepping stone to get from the 10 Commandments. Through the 10 plagues to the 10 utterances. Because when God uttered this world into existence, none of us were there. So the reason why in Kiddush we say that Shabbos is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim and Zeichel Ma'aseh Bereshis, that the Sabbath is a remembrance to the Exodus of Egypt and to the creation narrative, is because the Exodus story lets us believe rationally that God is the master of the universe. Through the 10 plagues, God showed us God's dominion over this world. But what's also really interesting is that we think about the 10 Commandments as this wonderful moment of divine revelation, of intimacy between us and God, where God finally reveals God's self and speaks to us, like a chassan and like a marriage partner. And that is all true, but it's also kind of plan B. God very much wanted to be able to whisper this world into existence, and for us to be able, for us to be able to hear that. God wanted to speak, and God wanted us to listen, and then to be able to intuit the rest. And there were individuals who got the memo, right? Abraham got the memo. But as a rule, we didn't get it, and we're stubborn. And inevitably, God had to command us in a way that was harsh because we didn't understand what we were supposed to do in this world to begin with. So the idea of a mimer of the creation of the world also kind of lets us know that when God created this world, it was a much more pleasant place. People were speaking nicely. God was speaking nicely. And it was really there for us in this perfect balance. And I think for me, what the Mishnah really represents in the structure here, that when God created this world, there was an absolute perfect balance between good and evil. The choice was Adam's. And we've spoken about this before, that Adam could have just been passive, taken a Friday afternoon nap, and then could have gone into Shabbos sin-free, and that would have fixed the world tilting towards good forever in a permanent fashion. But instead, right, there was the sin. And as a result, we have the harshness of this world. Okay, I want to stop the share and hear from folks. But I think the obvious shift from the 4th chapter of of kind of like the ethical teachings is that now it seems to like be going back, right, literally to the very beginning, to let us know how are we supposed to kind of see our actions as part of the whole. And it's going to continue looking at Abraham and his tests and the 10 generations between Abraham and Noach. So it seems like, and they're for what it's worth, I think both in rabbinic and in academic traditions, this is the last chapter, even though there's 6. The 6th is really what's known as a set of braysos. It's Tanaitic material in that it's the same rabbis, the same time period, but it doesn't have the same weight as Tanaitic material as the Mishnah. So we have 5 chapters of Mishnayos, the 6th as braysos. Okay, so this is the first Mishnah in the last chapter, Pirkei Avos, and clearly there's a shift here. Thoughts on any of it? Yes, please, Chana.
So my question is on the second part, why do you need 10 day or 10 whatever it is, 10 utterances to punish the what do they call them here, the Rishayim, and to why 10? I mean, why does it have to be equal? So then it could have been 1 and 1, or
so
now we have 10 and 10. Why?
It's a great question. Your question is going to be better than the answer. I think the simplest is that when we think about our work in this world, we see it as very finite, right? We slept X number of hours, we consumed X number of calories, and it's like a very rigid, kind of fixed, concrete, established kind of impact. But I think what the Mishnah is trying to say is that no, they're echoes, right? The person does something, you're not just doing something, right? You're doing something, and it's exponential. That this world isn't just like this flat, one-dimensional existence. This world only came to being through 10 utterances, and that was just the first week. So I think it's trying to let us know that the impact of our actions can't be underestimated, good or bad. Don't look at it as just from the way in which we see it, but rather see it in this layered way. And that's true for both good and for bad. But yeah, your question's a good question. Meaning, I don't think it's about the parallel between the good and the bad. What I think it is the shift between, we see one world here. We see one world, and what the Mishnah is saying is that no, you don't understand that this world is like infinite in terms of the capacity, for the impact.
All right. I mean, I'm just wondering why they picked up 10 and not 12.
Yeah. I think 10 just represents a cycle. But yeah, I mean, 10. It's a great question. I mean, why the 10 commandments? The 10 kind of represents the order, right? Because after 10, it's a repetition of now 2 1s, right? In other words, from 1 to 9, you have new numbers, and then once you get to 10, it's the complete circle. As a rule, the last digit is always the same as the first, meaning it's the complete cycle of that, right? The 10s or the 1s. So I don't know. I mean, again, your question's a great question, but I think that's thematically the approach. Other thoughts? Yeah, please.
I'm a little perplexed. This seems to imply that if the world had been created with one utterance, that God would somehow not be able to adequately reward or adequately punish. And
yeah, sure.
Curious about that.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I'm also curious about it. We have a lot of statements, certainly around Hanukkah, that after the flood, right, which is kind of like a new creation, God took some of that light and hid it. The way the rabbis see kind of the light in general, and I think it's the same with these utterances, there's kind of a spectrum of how good can it be, how bad can it be. Like there's a limit. And the rabbis saw that as bad as the most horrific things are in this world, there's still a limit, and that limit is only there because it's imposed by God. To try to say it a little bit differently, when we count to Sfir Sa'imer, right, we count 49, and in rabbinic literature, 50, the nun, is the highest level in this world. 50 levels of understanding. Moses was like 49. The same thing in terms of the negative, that we were on the 49th level of spiritual impurity by Egypt. And the rabbis say that like once you go to that threshold of 50, like that's it. Like you've transcended into the place of no return. You're detached, either from the good or the bad. And the rabbis describe it as a U, that we go from like negative 40, right? In those 49 days, it's from negative 49 to positive 49 because we're like just switching. So that really is a consequence of the flood, that the rainbow, the Zohar says, the reason why there's a rainbow after the flood of Noach is that the rainbow is just half of the circle, in that before the flood, there was 360 kind of degrees. And then God said, like, look, we gave you this beautiful world and you destroyed it because there was too much power. There was too much mishandling of that power. You couldn't handle it properly. So God essentially cuts it in half. So the rainbow is half of what it used to be, which is on some level how we end up with this strange 49, 50 as opposed to the obvious 100. So all I can say is that this was the kind of the space that God felt we as who we are today. And this is also very difficult to understand. I don't have great language for it. There's a principle within Jewish thought that's known as Yeridus Hadairis. There is Yerida means to go down. It's almost like it's Yerida. Every generation we're further removed from the giving of the Torah. And one way that maybe this is not meant to dehumanize people, but if you make a copy of a copy of a copy of a photocopy, at some point it's just really blurry. And our genetics don't physically devolve. If anything, if you think about evolution, there's a way in which physically we do evolve from our primordial ancestors, but spiritually it's in the opposite direction. One of the ways to kind of understand this, my Tal's here with me. What's wrong? No, I put the donuts in the fridge. Sorry. This is itself. So we come in here last night, we'd go to a Wawa, and I see Tal, what do you want? And he says, I want donuts. And normally donuts is not something we eat, but it's Hanukkah and it's Tal. So it says 2 for $6. Okay. So they're the Entenmann's donuts. So we go up to the thing and the guy says it's $5.89. And I said, I thought the sign, is it not 2 for $6? And he said, yeah, it's 2 for $6 or 1 for $5.89. So I said, listen, 2 for $6 is not a bad deal, but 1 for $5.89 is. Tal, can you grab another box of donuts? It's worth the 11 cents. We'll bring another one back to Wendy. So we open up a thing of donuts. I leave one out on the counter, and because my mother's not going to be here for a while, I put the extra ones. I put them in the fridge. So I had half of a donut this morning. Tal had a donut, and Tal just came to me like, did you eat the rest of the donuts? Did you eat the other 6 donuts? So I let him know in the freezer, in the refrigerator. Okay, way too much information, but that's my life. So
there are priorities, Rabbi. There are priorities.
Yes, no, for sure. I don't know. I guess it's a personal preference for those who eat donuts. Wendy loves the chocolate. Tal likes the plain ones. Yeah, I love the ones with the little coffee little things on there, but they make a mess. Anyways. There's something deep there. Why don't they just have the best donut? Because what's the best donut for one person, not the best donut for another person. And so like it lets us know that, okay.
And I hope there was a mission
Rabbi?
for that somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, Margot.
What kind of donuts do wicked people eat?
Oh, the ones with trans fats. Yeah. That's a good question.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I have heard over the years that whole idea that the further we are away from Sinai or our sages, the less spiritual or the less whatever we are. And your comparison, an apt one about different generations on a photocopier machine, except accepting that idea, and I've heard it for decades. I'm old enough to say for decades or for generations, actually. What hope is there?
Oh, you have to be optimistic. So let me try to give it a little bit more language. I want to give two different examples of the differences between the evolution and the devolving or the other, and also to let you know how lucky we are that God grades us on such a curve, right? Like we're so far removed. The fact that we're showing up for a class, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Pirkei Avot, everyone gets an A. Everyone gets an A, right? That's the reason to be hopeful for that. So there's one story. There was a doctor in Yerushalayim who was having Shabbos guests over. And these Shabbos guests were from Or Sameach, and they were new to exploring their own tradition. These were bright college, students on a break, and so they're looking around. Lots of Sfarim. It's lots of Sfarim. Anyways, also has a bunch of medical journals, and so he sees them looking around, and the rabbi says, "Do you know what the difference is? The difference is between these books, the Torah books, and these books, the medical books?" And they say, "No." It happens to be Sfarim look very, very nice. My father has old medical books. My father's a doctor. They also look like leather bound and things are very nice also. Anyways, he said these, as soon as they're printed, the medical journals, they're already out of date. The newer they are, the more relevant stuff from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, it's all been replaced. The things over here, the older they are, right, the more valuable they are in terms of the wisdom because they're closer to the source. So that's a difference in terms of the evolution of science and right the way in which we're farther from the source. There's another funny story. It's not so nice, but it's not so offensive. I believe the story is told about Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky. Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky now is in his 90s. He lives in Philadelphia. I've met him many times. I'll just tell you one nice thing. The story is nice about him. He has a custom. He's very short. And he's everybody. He's a celebrity in the yeshiva world. I mean, his father was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, so he goes to a wedding. Everybody wants a blessing. Everybody wants to ask him a question. So the occasions that I've had to speak to him, I always wait for like no one to be there, and so I can ask him, speak to him in learning. But invariably, people come over. When you say Shalom Aleichem, he takes your hand and he won't let go of your hand until you're done the conversation. Because what happens, people come over and then like you're in the middle of the thing, you get pushed away. So he holds onto your hand until you're done talking, and it's super sweet. So his father was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. I believe he dies in the 1980s. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky also was one of the great rabbis of America. Was not American. I think Rabbi Shmuel also was born in Europe. Anyways, they're flying on a plane. And for whatever reason, they couldn't sit together. And Rabbi Yaakov's sitting in one place, Rabbi Shmuel, his son, is sitting in another place. And throughout the plane ride, he comes, Tati, can I get you something to drink? Tati, did you eat enough? Tati, what can I get you? Are you comfortable? Rabbi Shmuel keeps checking in on his father. And this nice, lovely guy who's sitting next to Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, having no idea, who this guy is, says, I don't understand. What did you do as a father? I can't even get my kids to call me on my birthday. And here you have your kid who's coming, every 20 minutes to make sure that you're taken care of. He says, what's your secret? And so Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says to him, it's not a secret. My son sees me as one stage, closer to Adam, the first person who's created in the image of God. You believe that you came from monkeys. Why should your son come and you're just closer to an ape, right? So it's not the nicest story, right? Not the nicest story, but right, there's some there. So the mystics, Mario, just to try to give reasons for optimism, the Hasidic commentators in particular see this world having been created from this tower, going all the way up to heaven. It's a very famous Hasidic image, and that where the base of the tower is in Jerusalem. And that in the process of creation, the tower falls. That which is closest to heaven falls furthest away from that which is grounded here on earth, which is in Jerusalem, which is the place of the most overt and exposed holiness. And that is the purpose. The further something is, really the holier it is. And it's covered, right? And it's buried and it's concealed. But like that's the work. So, and I can tell you from my own experiences, my own lifetime, right? The things that people today can do, right, through digging, it's the degree of difficulty, right? But we see it. How is it that after generations of being detached from something, a person's inspired and they're able to come back to the Jewish tradition or to a level of engagement as if they didn't skip a beat? Like, it's an amazing thing. The reward that's given in this world in terms of access to spirituality when a person starts digging. It's one of the things that we're meant to believe in. If you search, you find. And that's something that I think is unique to generations that came later. There were always individuals in different generations, that were able to do these kind of miraculous feats. But it's particularly, I think, in our times that we're able to kind of see this miraculous return. It comes in waves. It's not always smooth, but I think that's the reason to be optimistic. That when people are digging now, what we're uncovering is things so much closer to the source than I think things that they uncovered in previous generations. All right, friends, pace yourself on the donuts. Don't overdose. And stay safe, stay warm, check in on people, and I will see everybody, God willing, tomorrow.
Have a safe trip back to New York.
Thank you. We're going to take it we're going to keep checking in with the weather and try to make responsible choices. All right. Thank you all so very much. Be well.